All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Danielle, would you like to introduce the topic or shall I?
You can go for it today.
Okay, perfect. So today in this academics and conversation chat, we are going to be talking about how to make the most of your winter break. This is a topic that actually Danielle came up with as something that we wanted to discuss, thinking about not only ways that you should be thinking about rest, but also ways that perhaps that you can be making the most of your break to prepare for the upcoming semester and also to make the most of the time in between in general. So we're going to get started. So Danielle, I'm going to hand it off to you to pose the first question. And just to introduce the general academics and conversation format, we're going to be doing about a 20-minute chat between Danielle and myself here live on YouTube. If you have any questions or things that you want to bring up, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And then we are going to go have a private conversation with our Accepted Society members who are here with us today, who have their screens turned off so you can't see them on YouTube. But we're going to have a conversation internal to us so we can talk a little bit more freely about the things that are on our minds in relation to this topic. So Danielle, lead us
Awesome.
on.
Thanks, Kaylin. Hi, everyone here. And then I see there's quite a few people logging on YouTube. Just quickly, in case people don't know who I am, my name is Dr. Danielle Lawson. I work with Kaylin as the head of academic planning and development at Accepted Consulting. And then I also co-founded Accepted Society with Kaylin. I make academia lifestyle content on YouTube. But here today to talk about how to make the most of our winter break, like Kaylin mentioned. And I just have a first question to the audience, both people watching on YouTube, you feel free to put it in the chat. And then those are our members who were on, but their cameras are off, and you all can put it in the chat. Or if you're wanting to speak out loud, you can do that. I'm curious, what are everyone's goals for winter break? Do you have any goals? What are they? What are your thoughts?
Well, I will answer this question since I am the other side of this conversation. So one goal that I actually have for winter break I'll say one that's academic and one that's not academic. So one that is academic is that I really want to focus on kind of getting ahead on grant proposals and things that need to be taken care of for this following summer as I head into the prospectus and comprehensive exam stage of my PhD. I want to make sure that I'm using this time effectively, both to rest as well as to get ahead on those things that are on my list of things to do, but also not overdoing it. And then the thing that's very not academic is that I used to be a professional athlete. I used to ride horses professionally. And one thing that I would really like to get into that I haven't really been able to since coming to Yale is that I would like to start riding again. That's something that I know has been really good for my mental health and for my physical health in the past. And it's something that I want to reintroduce into my daily life. And it's something that I put on the back burner while I was at Oxford and while I had started my PhD, but I would really like to get back into it. So we have a couple different comments in our private chat from Accepted Society. And Roshni says that she's going to be resting from the hectic semester. And Hannah says that she's trying to find a way to balance between rest and working and not wanting to feel guilty about working. So we're definitely going to be touching on a lot of these different subjects, especially related to rest in today's conversation. But Danielle, what are your goals for the winter break?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So mine are very similar to you in the sense that I have very specific goals associated with work stuff and personal stuff. And then I also have goals that are associated with resting and self-care. So for me with the work stuff and personal stuff, it's actually for the work stuff, just really getting myself prepared and thinking about goal planning for the next year. 2022, new year, new energy. I know people set goals and intentions for the new year. I don't tend to set intentions because sometimes that throws me off personally, but I do like to think about okay, where am I at in my overall 5-year plan? Where am I heading? How do I need to adjust? How do I need to continue to move forward with the status quo? What needs to change?
Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot of planning for my academic side of things, like my tenure packet, that sort of thing. I have to start putting that stuff together for mid tenure review. In terms of like my own like social media and like personal branding stuff, I have some goals there about like getting my website kind of set up, thinking about like branding. I've been posting with Vlogmas and getting back into the YouTube grind since some of that fell to the wayside with like this like second year of being a professor, but being in person. And then the rest of it is to like rest. I just recently bought a house, and so we're like moving in, and so like resting without abandon when I want to, but then also knowing that I can work if I want to. Also, we have some more people commenting like on YouTube and here in the private chat on YouTube. Morgan said like a goal for them would be to prep for interviews and to make sure that they are resting and staying active, which is like a great part of it. Sometimes, you know, the break can feel very like it's like a mental space, but sometimes it can be like too much rest. So it's like how to balance all of that. Some others are talking about mental health being important, going over information that they did not have time to go over during the semester. That's what Laura said. And that is so important. That's something we're going to talk about today, how having some time to rest is, you can rest mentally, you can rest physically, you can rest intellectually. There's so many different types of rest, but sometimes the breaks are nice because it allows you to spend time focusing on things that you didn't have time to focus on during the semester because of coursework or meetings or whatever it might be. And then a lot of people in the private chat are also saying like, not feeling guilty about not working, which is so valid. And that the people always feel like they should be doing more during the break. And so that is something we really wanted to talk about today, resting. Obviously, we just want to make sure that we start off and say that it is 100% okay and valid to rest during the breaks. I think sometimes it can feel like we need to do everything because we have so much time, but you're allowed to rest. It is a holiday. There's a reason why universities are closed. You can enjoy time with family, chosen family and friends, but this can also look different for everyone. I don't know, Kayla, if you have so much that you want to add to that.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to address in terms of resting is also thinking about what is actually restful. So for me, like being with my sister and like going and seeing a movie or like having time to just be with my family can be restful. And at other times it can sometimes be stressful, like being with family and whatnot can feel sometimes a bit like an obligation in terms of using that time of rest to be with family. And so also thinking about what rest is actually helpful to you. And so for example, I was thinking about when I should go home for the holiday break and when I should come back. And normally I come back the day before classes start and I leave immediately after classes end. However, this year I'm trying to think about giving myself a little bit more time before the semester because I know that I love my family and I want to be around them as much as possible. But one thing that is actually really restful to me is coming back into my own space and like getting a routine established and being able to take that time alone. So also I wanted to just pose the question for you to kind of mentally percolate on of what rest actually means for you. And also if rest, like being with friends and if you're, for example, an extrovert and you actually really feel recharged by being around people, then that is something that you want to consider in terms of the way that you're using your time during the break. And not to say that you have to like strategically plan all of your time throughout any point in time. However, just kind of consciously thinking about what actually works for you. And I know that for me, making sure that I separate enough time so that way I can be alone in my own space back in New Haven is something that's going to be really important for me to feel ready for the new semester. And that's something that I'm going to implement in terms of rest.
No, I love that. I love that you posed that question, like what feels restful? Because for me, and I don't know if anyone could relate to this, particularly during the pandemic at the beginning of it. I'm someone who I'm at my best when I am busy, and I actually struggle with feeling guilty for feeling busy, wanting to be busy. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later, or actually in the next section. But for me, if I lay down on the couch, I know for some people, if I lay on the couch and I watch movies all day, every day, that's great for the first 2 days. Then after that, I am bored out of my mind. And for me, it's actually anxiety inducing and stressful to not be doing something. And so I I do the things that I want to do. If I don't want to work on a paper and writing, I'm not going to work on it, but maybe I want to tinker around and think about things like content planning, or maybe I want to think about this project I'm really excited about, or maybe I do want to vlog because I've been excited to get back into that. So having that like very strategic rest is important, but then also, and it really like takes us into our next subject. And it's something that Thea said in the chat, that she's doing a 4-week winter course because due to study abroad next semester, they have 6 weeks off. And something we wanted to talk about was strategic productivity and what that means. So you don't have to spend the whole break working if you want to, because that's what makes sense for you and that's what you find joy in. That is totally valid and that is okay. But we wanted to talk about what does it mean to be strategically productive, and actually start talking about this idea of toxic rest messaging. For those that watch Kaylin and I's vlogs, we actually had like a clip in one of Kaylin's vlogs, and then it will be a clip in mine coming up soon in the next few days, that when we were actually planning out this academics in conversation, we were talking about this idea of toxic rest messaging. So this idea that it begins to make you feel guilty for doing any sort of work at all, that somehow you're not like using it as a form of resistance, but sometimes working on yourself is a form of resistance too, instead of just working on the traditional 9-to-5 work stuff. I don't know, Kaylin, if you have something that you want to add there, particularly thinking about like, what did strategic productivity look for you when you were a transfer student and a college student, since you're closer to that than I am?
Yeah. So I wanted to mention one thing, because this is something that Danielle and I've talked a lot about and I've thought a lot about. So as somebody that obviously puts my life out on YouTube, I get a lot of comments from people commenting on my life and my work patterns and how much I'm working, etc. And for me, like, I actually find it more upsetting when people keep telling me like, you're doing too much, you need to rest, you need to stop, you need to rest. And I'm like, but I like I chose this for myself. Like I actually like staying up and doing this work. And so sometimes I actually feel like we also send out the opposite messaging, as well-meaning as it truly is. And I know that people are trying to be caring. However, even for me, I find that messaging to be kind of discrediting of what I'm wanting to do. Like I actually really like what I'm working on. And so it's not something like, it may not be what you would want for yourself, but it is what I want for myself. And so sometimes I just wanted to also mention that it can go both ways. Like it can be that there is this system in place that really demands your labor and your attention 24/7. And that requires you to put in the hours for someone else. But also on the flip side, when you're doing work that you do truly enjoy and that you do want to engage in, that the messaging in that you have to be resting, you have to be resisting, can also create some tension. And so that's just something I wanted to bring up as a point of like discussion, just because I don't see a lot of that. I don't see a lot of that messaging, especially on social media, about how that can also be a little bit, I don't want to use the word triggering, but something to that effect. Like it can, like, sometimes that messaging can be, it can be frustrating to me. And in terms of strategic productivity and strategic planning, like transfer students and college students, you're on a different timeline. And so especially when you're on the semester system, you're in the semester, you're in your coursework, and then it's exam, and then you get to take a break, and then you start up with a new set of classes, which is very different than the graduate school timeline, where you're kind of working on these long-term projects where there's quite literally always something that could and should be done. And when thinking about this topic and kind of thinking about how it affects college and graduate and transfer students and college students that are perhaps thinking about graduate school, or they're thinking about some summer internships, thinking perhaps about using that winter break to not necessarily do the work, but began kind of doing the research and getting some groundwork. So that way, when you do go into the new semester, for example, if you're starting a thesis, or if you're starting an independent project, or if you're going to be applying for internships, that you just have the general rubric to follow, and that you can go to potentially a professor or an advisor and say, hey, I have this project I'd really like to pursue. Here are my initial thoughts. Doesn't mean that you have to like go and write the thing, or it doesn't mean you have to start filling out applications for jobs or internships, but just begin kind of thinking about it and start kind of laying out the groundwork so that way you're aware of what's to come. I think that for me, one point of anxiety is not having just a knowledge of what's coming up and how to plan for it. When I don't feel like I at least have thought about things in advance for a couple of months, then that's when it stresses me out the most. And so even if it's not necessarily that I'm going to be working on the actual application or writing the statements or any of those things, starting to think ahead about those plans, which is why we kind of set up Accepted Society and set up the academic planning consultations as we did, is that way you, like, our members for Accepted Society have a place to begin working on that. And that's something that I've implemented in my own schedule personally, but it's also a lot more fun to do it with friends. So just because you're planning ahead and starting to do this research and thinking about what may be to come, also doing that with friends and finding other people in community that you can begin thinking about those things with is another thing that can also contribute to it being a little bit more fun. Danielle?
Yeah, sorry, say that again.
Oh, do you want to talk about like the grad student and professor perspective?
Sure, absolutely. And it actually, we keep getting to like some good transitions in YouTube chat as well. That it can look very, so for both grad students and professors, when we have these winter breaks or summer breaks, but in this case, we're talking about winter break, you've been given this like mental freedom from teaching or coursework. So it's either you're taking coursework and you're TAing or TFing, or you are teaching that course and you're creating the information for that course and you're engaging with students and grading and all of that stuff. And not having that actually takes a huge mental load and frees it up for both groups. I don't think students think as much about like how much teaching takes, but it's easy to think about how much time taking a course takes. And so there's a lot of things that you can do with that because you just have the mental space to work on other things. So like, I know a lot of people, like grad students in particular, will work on like getting ahead on reading or reading for their dissertation in their research area instead of just reading for courses. Because when you have 3 books a week assigned, like you've had before, Kaylin, you don't really have time to read like for your own research and to stay up to date on the reading. So people will do that. That's something I did when I was in graduate school. And then also working on grant proposals. A lot of grant proposals will get announced towards the beginning of the year because of fiscal year ends, particularly dependent if it's funding that is outside of a university institution. So that's a good time to work on grant proposals, get those ideas down, but you don't have to like think about it completely. And then with professors, and this relates to the question that Thea asked in YouTube, it's, you know, not only are you not teaching, which you need the break. And right now, professors, just like students, are exhausted because we're trying to work in this pandemic world. That's been a little bit difficult. But planning out courses, it varies whether a professor is going to have their syllabus done before the winter break or during. A lot of it's that it happens during the winter break. Like for me, I plan out my courses in the sense that I know the readings and the syllabus, and I know the like topics we'll be talking about, but I don't necessarily plan the lecture material. And I do that 1 week at a time because I like to adjust as my students are needing adjustments. So I don't plan everything out, but I do have the structure there in place for the students. And that way I know what I'm doing each week. But a lot of what I do, and I know a lot of other professors do it, is thinking about goals for the year, particularly people on the tenure track. We have certain expectations of us in terms of writing. We know our students are working towards milestones and we have to help guide them through that. And so we're trying to think about like what research needs to be done in terms of research milestones. What do we need to be publishing for publishing milestones and submitting grants that might be coming up? Plus also what milestones are our students going to need help getting through in their writing. So it's nice to have like this like space to like plan it all out. So a lot of times that's why, and Morgan actually said in the chat that with the university requirements is that we have to post syllabi a week before courses start, it's because they recognize that a lot of professors are using the time when they're not teaching to actually think about what we're teaching next, because it takes so much time and planning to do. I actually will be putting together a YouTube video for anyone who's interested in that to get some insight of like, what does it take to plan a course? Because I didn't even know until I had to do it. But it's cool to see the other side now of like what it takes. And a lot of that goals, thinking about your goals for the year, it also relates to, if you're trying to think about these goals for the break, realistic goal planning. Kaylin, do you want to talk a little bit about realistic goal planning and what we mean by that?
So oftentimes it's the like New Year syndrome, as I like to call it, where we think of a fresh start, whether that's the new year, a new month, new semester, as like, this is the time when I'm going to meet every single one of my expectations and goals. And we go a little above, a little too, we overdo it, in which case then it's really hard to keep those promises to yourself. And then when you fail on one, then you end up kind of crumbling and not letting the others fall flat. And so one thing that I say all the time is that like confidence is built on keeping your promises to yourself. And so thinking about making sure that you're keeping promises, or you're setting expectations or goals that are actually feasible within the time frame, and that you can begin to work towards, and also thinking not only about the goals, but thinking about the plan to set up how it is that you're going to go about that. And again, being realistic, like it's not going to just be, I'm going to go to the gym 4 days a week in my planner and it's just going to happen. Also try to set up systems in place that way you can begin slowly kind of working into it, and that you can maybe even do that and build it as a habit with your colleagues, with your friends, or your family. And so thinking a little bit about how it is that you can feasibly use that time to move into this kind of new transition period. But now we've essentially reached our 20-minute point. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to end off the live. Thank you all so much for joining on the YouTube live today for this conversation. Now we're going to meet with our Accepted Society members for the rest of the hour to chat about this topic. And if you would like to be involved in future conversations, then please feel free to check out Accepted Society. All the links will be in the description, and I'll also throw it in the YouTube chat.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. We really enjoyed talking to you. And so if you have any questions or concerns, because I know more are definitely coming into the chat, please feel free to reach out to both Kaylin and myself. You can find all of Kaylin's link is at the Redhead Academic. Everything for me, it's Dr. Danielle Lawson. We both have YouTube channels, and you can find us through both the Accepted Consulting and Accepted Society Instagram handles, and you can send us